And in 1982, George Doran did write something in a newsletter about SMART goals. Okay, gosh, why does everyone love that so much? I don't know. But other than him, there has been probably about 8,000 researchers who put about 1 million hours of study into this. And from that, yeah, there are certain elements, but it's of course, you want them to be more immediate. Get that temporal discounting work for you. You want them to be so specific. I mean, this is something I almost have to hand over hand with people again and again because they just don't quite get how specific a good goal is. And that's the thing. You have to be able to not to have an emotional reaction towards your own procrastination, which most people get stuck on, and take it more like, okay, this is something I have to work with and take responsibility because there are so many things you can do about it. And sometimes you're just 5 inches below water and you just need one technique to actually be in a place where you're okay with your life.
Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Weeks. Welcome to another episode of the Bounce Podcast. Today on the podcast, my guest is Professor Piers Steel. Piers is one of the world's leading researchers on the science of motivation and procrastination. He's also the inventor of an equation that is able to explain every scientific finding on procrastination ever and is laid out in his off-cited book, The Procrastination Equation: How to Stop Putting Things Off and Start Getting Stuff Done. Piers is a distinguished research chair at the University of Calgary, where he teaches human resources and organizational dynamics at the Haskayne School of Business, and his research has appeared in several outlets around the world, ranging from Psychology Today, The New Scientist, to publications like Good Housekeeping and The New Yorker. Although the book is about overcoming procrastination, the context is on increasing motivation, how we motivate or demotivate ourselves for whatever it is we want to accomplish. And it's the topic of the show. I think we've all, to some extent, have been students of motivation from the standpoint of ourselves and trying to figure it out, right? Why we're not motivated or how to get motivated. First, let me prep those of you unfamiliar with the book and the equation. So the motivation equation is thus. It's motivation equals expectancy times value divided by impulsiveness times delay. So our motivation towards any task or goal is a function of our expectancy of achieving the task or getting the reward times the value of that reward, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, divided by our impulsiveness, how early or often we get sidetracked or distracted, times delay. So how far off in the future is the goal or the thing we're trying to accomplish, or how long is it going to take to accomplish whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. The beauty of the equation to me is that it kind of gives me a way to not only audit either some lack of motivation or my tendency to procrastinate, but then it empowers me to be able to do something about it by tweaking the various parts of that equation, okay? So, for example, if the goal is too far off, then I need to figure out how to bring it closer to me by maybe setting arbitrary deadlines or better yet, reducing the goal into very, very small chunks of something that I can do either now or tomorrow. So we talk about some long-held myths on why we procrastinate, why we really procrastinate, how the brain kind of works against us. We break down each of the parts that make up motivation and kind of talk through how to work with them. We talk a lot about the problem of impulsiveness, and then Piers gives some tricks on how to thwart temptation. So very interesting. We talk about the power of context and the number one reason people procrastinate. I really think you're going to find this interesting and very, very helpful, especially if there's some things that you want to get done and you feel kind of a lack of motivation around it, or you're not sure what's going on, you're procrastinating. So without further ado, here is Piers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I've tried to distill at least my questions here, but there's a lot I want to ask you about. So I'm just going to kind of jump in. So let me make sure you are right now at the University of Calgary.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's teaching scholarly publications, and I try and occasionally, not often enough, get that into something more popular nonfiction.
And you're running a behavioral lab?
I would say that's kind of, I have had one, but it's kind of gone to online. Basically, I'm now kind of collaborating with people around the world. So it worked out better that way to go virtual than do it all local.
So we're talking about motivation and your book, The Procrastination Equation. So first, this was based on a Ph.D. thesis. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Literally, my Ph.D. was in procrastination, and which makes fun. I mean, when you go to a cocktail party and people ask what you do, and I say, well, I study procrastination, it always leads to eyes kind of lighting up and, oh, you should talk to me. I have so many stories.
So I think that's kind of meta in a sense that you're working on what really is the problem of procrastination is very acute, is in trying to finish your thesis.
Oh yeah, sure. I suffered from it. I mean, research is me-search, but to be total disclosure, I've also done research on workplace violence, corruption, and driving with a cell phone. So not all of those I've done. But procrastination, yes, I was a big procrastinator, and this was, physician, heal thyself.
So how was the research done?
Well, yeah, there was two parts of it. One was a beautiful little thing of a wired classroom, one of the original ones, an early precursor to those massive open online courses. So with this, we had about 200 students, and we knew when they did every little lick of research, of work for their course. And so we had beautiful behaviors. And so we could actually see them, how their work, assignment by assignment, over 80 assignments, as it was broken down that way over the course of a term. And then we actually got them to answer like a ton of individual questions. And that was a really, really good part of it. I mean, in fact, if you want motivation research to continue to take jumps forward, massive open line courses are the way to go. You have a huge number of people. You can do different variations of online experiments. You can capture a lot of information about them. But the more powerful part of that dissertation was the meta-analysis. And I was an early adopter of meta-analysis. So it was just coming around. One of the early founders was Frank Schmidt, and he trained Denise Owens, who trained me. And I went into this area, and I organized it. I rationalized it. I found out what was common. I cut through the noise. And when you get down to it, the 3 was the magic number. There was about 3 major reasons for why people procrastinate. And that became the procrastination equation.
So I want to jump into the equation. So temporal motivation theory. So
right.
the equation. And it is, per you, the most recent developments in motivational research. It's an integrated theory from which other motivational theories can be derived. So the equation is motivation equals expectancy times value, and then impulsiveness times delay. Yeah,
that's right. And sometimes we add a little constant on the bottom to shoot it from going to infinity when time gets short. But yeah, I mean, we all build on the shoulder of giants. I mean, one of the person that really helped me with my thinking was this early researcher, George Ansley, and he wrote a book called Pico-Economics, and he talked about the importance of hyperbolic discounting. Like, I think when I checked it out, only about a dozen people had ever kind of cited that book before. But brilliant, brilliant stuff. And it just pointed me in the right direction. And then I got to see from that kind of viewpoint how everybody was just in shades and nuance of the same underlying formula. They were just emphasizing different parts of it. You have, for example, people like Albert Bandura, who focuses on the expectancy or self-efficacy part. Other people focus on the elements of self-discipline and self-control, getting the impulsiveness part. You can always push a model till it breaks. I mean,
sure.
all of economics is based on subjective expected utility theory, which is really just that expectancy times value part. And sometimes they throw in this exponential discounting function, which doesn't work as well as hyperbolic, but they love their rational models, right? So, and we actually kind of in the latest version, we kind of break it down into 2 parts. One is goal choice, which tends to be a lot more rational and goal striving. And that part about expectancy isn't quite so linear in the goal striving part, because What you want is good calibration between the difficulty of the task and your investment of time into it. And what you find is that people think it's too easy and they have high expectancy of doing it, they underinvest their time. It's a classic Aesop fable, the tortoise and the hare.
So to the equation itself, and I'm quoting you here, as a deadline for any task gets pushed further into the future, delay comes into play, and our motivation to tackle the task decreases. Impulsiveness, part of the equation, applies the effect of delay. So if you're impulsive, you are going to get distracted easier.
That's right, yeah, and we differ in that. Some people are more impulsive than others. We can also be more impulsive, during the time of day or even, what's going on with their lives. I mean, they even call, for example, where when people have too much to drink, they call that, and they become really short-sighted, and they call that alcohol myopia. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but impulsiveness is basically how sensitive you are to time.
And I like that this equation seems to consider both nurture and nature in that sense. So
motivation increases basically as you get closer to the consequences. So what's distant, and there's people talking about, I've even found it, like David Hume actually did a really nice summary in his Inquiry into Human Nature. So we're not the first ones to really notice this. There's a lot of people who kind of say, hey, throughout history, saying as we get closer to an event, our motivation tends to go up. And they talked about it informally and even as far back as the 1920s about press. Certain things have certain press, and when you're close to, they have this kind of motivational press or power. So the idea here is that most of our motivation just naturally happens just before the do. And this is actually used to be really adaptive. But when you have these really distal, really long-term goals, and that need a lot of work ahead of time to get them done, waiting for motivation to naturally come upon you is a fool's game. We're just not designed for that. We're designed for hunting, gathering, to eat when we're hungry, to track down animals, to basically have a time horizon of how long it takes food to rot. And anything longer than that is beyond our control, and there is no reason for us to develop it. But we built up society almost overnight, this civilization almost overnight. And yet we still have this legacy of this, and I must say, it's a beautiful system. The wonder that is man, that is mankind, that's humankind. It's remarkable. And we run it all on 20 watts of electricity.
So if we reduce procrastination, is that the same as increasing motivation?
Well, let's back up even one more step and really kind of just talk about what procrastination is. I give a longer definition, but really it's putting off despite expecting to be worse off. Now, sometimes you get lucky. Of course, we all do. We put it off, and lo and behold, it was canceled. We never had to do that. A glorious day that is. But more often than not, our expectations are borne out. So yeah, we should have done it earlier. And because we're worse off, guess what? We tend to be less happy, less healthy, less wealthy, and all the less of. So if you can get the motivation to when you really want it, and this is what most people's lives are like. They want let's say you're thirsty and you want a glass of water, but you really want a glass of motivation. You want enough to kind of get yourself through this project. Right now it's coming with an eyedropper. You can feebly pushing it through. And then just before it's due, it's coming with a fire hose. And there doesn't seem to be a way of really regulating that. So a lot of people just say, well, I give up. I guess I have to do it just before the deadline. And then they make a lot of justifications that really, it's best to do before the deadline anyway. But if you go and ask them, hey, how would you like some of that motivation earlier? There is a resounding yes, of course. Then that strips away the illusion that they're really comfortable with this, is that we have tremendous difficulty finding motivation to when it's convenient for our schedules, because we are designed to only get motivation to just before when a project is due.
So it seems then the opposite of what I said to some degree, that if you can increase motivation, that's the lever. And then you'll reduce the procrastination.
That's right.
Because it seems like, I could be wrong, Piers, but it seems like people are tackling it via the procrastination side. Like, here's how not to procrastinate. And I think that's where I came up short when I was having discussions with people, is that I'm not even sure I'm going to push through to use those techniques that are going to prevent me from procrastinating, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, there's lots. I mean, sometimes there's nothing wrong with your goals. You just have too many temptations around. We're always going to do what we want to do most. And if I surround you with really A++ temptations, in the same place you're working, doesn't work. I mean, it's very difficult to do. When you have things that are so succulent and so readily available, saying no is a constant struggle. And that gets in the way of things that actually will give us, long-term and sizable rewards. So, lives get twittered away in like iPhone apps, in social media, in YouTube binges. And of course, they're all designed that. We talked about that a little earlier. They're designed to be as addictive and engaging as possible. And now that they have all of our information about us, they know us better than than anyone else in the world, better than our best friends. And they can make sure that they can be the devil in our ear at all times.
Okay, so let's break down the equation real quick. So expectancy, do you expect to succeed?
Yeah. It's idea of self-confidence, whether you think this is going to work and I'm going to get what I want out of this.
Right. And
task.
Then value, this could be the reward for the work you're going to do, or meaning, the meaning that it has. You care about it.
Yeah. And some people split that into intrinsic versus extrinsic. Intrinsic is the rewards you get from actually doing it, which is really nice because there's very little delay, and you get a lot more motivation with tasks that you actually get pleasure as you're doing it, rather than when you get the reward just for money at the end. It's very difficult to be motivated sufficiently by money alone to be successful because it's temporarily discounted or delayed.
So if we can ramp or tweak the expectancy times value, or the expectancy part, like, can you envision yourself succeeding, or somehow constructing a vision of, hey, if I work hard enough, I have a high probability of success here.
That's right. And we can, each one of these are their own universes too. You can dive down the rabbit hole in each one of them, like books are being written about each one and nuances. Like,
yes.
If you actually want to have the best form of expectancy, it's the belief that if I work hard, if I focus on it, then I'll succeed. Not just, I believe I will succeed. It's success based upon effort. It actually is the most effective form.
And you could also target that, correct, Pierce? In other words, let's say the goal is, I'm going to write a book. In order not to cause yourself harm in this equation, you can set an expectancy to say, you know what, I can work hard and write X amount of pages a week or something, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And then you break it down from the overall to sub. I believe I can do it. I believe I can write a chapter this month. I believe I can do so much today. And
you break it down to small components that you can do, and then really ramp the expectancy there. To your point, finishing a book is pushed way out in the future. And now we're counteracting some of this, the motivation, because we've pushed it out too far.
Yeah, and it's too big, and it's also at that size it becomes also kind of almost foreign. No, I can't do that. It's too big. Can you write like 300 words today? Sure, no problem. That's what Hemingway's goal was. I think it was 300 to 500 words a day.
So we're on the expectancy side. That's something, if we want to motivate ourselves, for everybody listening, that's something you can work on that, construct on that. And I'm going to push people to the book. And value is the reward. Thinking about either what I'm going to accomplish, how I will feel if I accomplish this, or why I care about this. So I'm ramping that kind of numerator. So let's talk about impulsiveness times delay. You talked about it earlier. You're less willing to delay gratification. You're kind of living in the moment for things, and you're not willing to kind of put things on delay to know to do the work now, or you're getting distracted.
Yeah, it's like Veruca Salt from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I don't care how, I want it now. Now is so good. Oh, now. Something then there's been like lots of fun little experiments like, how much money, if I give you, I could give $1,000 today. So great. Well, or I could give you a guaranteed check, like $1,100 tomorrow. I said, less sizable people say, I'll take the $1,000 now. But if you actually say, I could give you $1,000 in a year or $1,000 in a year in a day, everyone says, oh, it's a day's nothing. I'll wait the extra day. Because then that's an effective hyperbolic discounting, that we tend to overemphasize small differences in time that occur immediately in our kind of temporal window and become more rational about it when they're really further in the future. So the thing is that there's always something else to do. There's always a pleasure to be had now. And, I can write that book. I can write it, tomorrow's a good time to start. And right now, I want to indulge. I want to, we're in the golden age of television, videos, and there's a lot to kind of consume out there.
So that point, this is where distraction lives, right? In the impulsiveness. So you could just be naturally impulsive. So you have to kind of guard against, work on focus.
We kind of, there's lots of different ways of discussing that. I mean, if you can get, let's say, temptation, the access to temptation down to just a few seconds, boy, wow, that's just pure, unadulterated temptation. There's been a lot of great work on this, like in terms of, if ice cream, like I think Brian Wangsik, who does these all these great kind of food experiments, and he's written his own book. If you want to follow up, he's another great guy. He talked about whether if you take the lid off those ice cream coffins, and there was almost double the amount of purchase because that delay of opening up the ice cream to get it inside, that's time. And if you can shave even a few seconds off it, you become much more impulsive. So, I usually, when I'm doing workshops about this, I ask people how quickly they can get to a game on their phones. And it's usually about 2 seconds. Somebody's really fast. They just, boom. And when you have a temptation around you, you can get into 2 seconds. That's a really powerful temptation. Even if the value is low, the delay in it makes it strong because people forget about time. So we're constantly surrounded by these. We're not even getting that much pleasure at them. This like the amount of dopamine that's secreted is feeble, but they're immediate, and those are at the cost of our long-term but larger rewards. This happens all the time. In so many, it's ubiquitous. It's everybody. Like it's when people get the specialty coffee every day, and then forego, the wonderful, if they saved it all up, the wonderful vacation they could have taken, a real memory. It's not necessarily work versus pleasure. Sometimes it's a long-term pleasure that's way better versus a series of smaller short-term ones. And this plays out everywhere. It's basically baked into free market capitalism. It's how it works.
So how do we use this? First, being aware, I think, is a big part of it. And I want to talk about our brains in a second and what causes procrastination. But regarding impulsiveness, that's fascinating. And we want to kind of restrict, on the negative side, these things that would really are not giving us any value or helping us move forward on our goals. The internet, Facebook, things that Twitter, turn off notifications, things that they're easy access, right? So we want to kind of limit that.
Yeah, and most of our computer terminals where we do work are designed to enable consumption, not productivity.
Right, but can we use this part of our nature that's impulsive on the positive side? To your point, easier to write if writing's the goal. Make it.
Yeah, there's lots of different techniques.
Okay, got it. So it's not just preventative measures. There are some proactive things that you can work with how the brain is trying to work against you, or
yeah, of course. And one of them is pretty obvious. It's when do you have motivation? Well, just before deadlines. So those are naturally occurring almost always. So let's see if we can create some artificial ones. Let's reverse engineer deadlines. And in 1982, George Doran did write something in a newsletter about SMART goals. Okay, gosh. Why does everyone love that so much? I don't know. But other than him, there has been probably about 8,000 researchers who put up probably 1 million hours of study into this And from that, yeah, there are certain elements, but it's of course, you want them to be more immediate. Get that temporal discounting work for you. You want them to be so specific. I mean, this is something I almost have to hand over hand with people again and again because they just don't quite get how specific a good goal is.
Well, give me an example.
Well, okay, like I usually use the one about exercising. So people have New Year's resolutions. They say, I'm going to exercise. Okay, great. When are you going to exercise? Well, on this Saturday. Well, okay, when this Saturday? Saturday is a big time. The morning, after in the morning. Well, when during the morning? They said, well, after breakfast. Immediately after breakfast? Like, do you mean like after? Is that your cue? Yeah. So after breakfast, going to exercise. What type of exercise are you doing? Well, I'm going to the gym. Do you know which gym? Yeah, do you already have a membership there? They say, okay, I'm going to this gym to make it to this 10 o'clock class. So what time do you have to leave? They say, okay, I have to leave at 9:15. Is that enough time for signing up? 9 o'clock so I can get to the gym. Do you have everything packed beforehand? Right? Okay, yes, I do. So the night before, you got everything packed. So at 9 o'clock, you can leave, get to the gym, get signed in to make it to the 10 o'clock class. That has motivational power. And there's other things you can layer on top of that. You can, try and make sure it's a class you enjoy. You can create some public accountability by saying, I'm going to meet up somebody there. And these all things increases the cost of not going and increases the pleasure of going. But the idea here is to make a really good, sharp, some people call them line of sight goals.
Yeah, this is habit stacking, right?
Yeah, I know. And it goes by, everyone has their own branding for it because, we like everything that sounds new.
But this is what's great about, I think, your research and the book is that I've got pieces of this habit stacking. Here's a trigger if you want to build a good habit, but you have it as part of a greater whole.
That's right. Integrative whole, like a complete solution.
Exactly. Where, you know what I mean? I'm downstream. Here's a technique, do this, do that. Here's how to not to procrastinate. But, I'm not looking at my expectancy, which is maybe low, or the value.
Oh, yeah. Now, all those steps we don't have. We don't have a good diagnostic. I've pushed it forward in a couple of different ways, but I think I could do a lot more. We also have, a lot of these interventions tend to be everyone painted with the same brush. You got to try time blocking, habit stacking. You've got to try power of positive thinking. And it's like, that might be good for 5 or 10%. And the other 90% aren't going to benefit from that. And then even if they do it, a lot of people can't quite convert the theory into practice. It's like following a recipe from a book. And they missed a step or they didn't quite interpret it and their souffle won't rise. So all those things have to be really pieced apart almost lovingly to kind of make this good for everyone. I mean, there are people out there who, I guarantee, they've tried the techniques. It was the right technique for them, but their implementation was just a little bit off, and they gave up on it and saying it doesn't work. This is why I think is the real benefit of life coaches. As
soon as you were saying that, I was going to say, somebody should just make this a concrete model in the coaching field, right?
Oh, some people have. I learned about it afterwards. As you say, a lot of people use my work, but I kind of
you birth an industry, man. I'm glad to hear that because rah-rah only goes so far. I was thinking, you're right. This is a diagnostic tool, this equation where you can just kind of go, am I pushing this out too far? Am I being distracted? You can audit, and then you can actually try to amplify either the value or the expectancy, and that probably takes a little more work. But I saw a lot of resources. I was thinking of an app, basically, right? That kind of just asks you the questions going through this equation. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't say anything like that. That may be too shallow for this. I'm not sure.
No, I've tried, I would say, I've learned to respect the skills of app developers more. It has to be, we tried things. For example, we tried one, which I still kind of love, called Saint, S-A-E-N-T. And I think it still needs another couple rounds of development to get it just right. But it goes onto your laptop or desktop. It makes it a little harder to get to temptations. And as I say, sometimes all we need is adding another, believe it or not, 5 or 10-second delay. Think about you're going to the dinner table and they put a bread basket in front of you. and you're hungry. Good thing, because it's going to be a delicious meal. But you want to have some bread, so you butter up a piece of bread and you eat it. Now, if you eat another one, it's going to interfere with your meal, and you don't want to do with it, but it's delayed. So you take the bread basket and you put it to the other side of the table. And sometimes people would flip a napkin or put over it so they can't see it as easily. Like, where suddenly we don't have Piaget level of reasoning, 3-object permanence. That's all gone. But no, we know it, but it's not visually there cueing us all the time. And it's a little bit further away. And that's enough self-control. The entire idea, again, to get people to consume is to eliminate those delays, is to get the cues always there, those, in-app notifications, those delays so you can get into seconds. And that makes us less rational, and it makes it harder. And if a delay requires that you're only going to use, if a temptation requires that it has to be available in under 2 seconds or you're not going to use it, that isn't a very powerful reward. What you have is just a very immediate reward. And I think we can live our lives and have great lives that if it requires us waiting 10 seconds for a reward, or we're not going to use it, right? We'll still have a great life. But that's not the way money's made. It's made by, and as I kind of talked to this about earlier, it's made about hacking our operating system. And this is the world that we are increasingly in. So yeah, but you can reverse engineer it. And if you can get delays 10 seconds, if you can get rewards a little closer, yes, those are really good things. But again, one of 21 different levers that you have available to you.
So let's talk about why we procrastinate. I would think if we understand why we procrastinate, it's going to go a long way toward reducing procrastination. So let's talk about the brain. You touched on it earlier. And what causes procrastination or circumvents motivation? It's the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex interplay.
Yeah. And we can start with the equation. Then we can get into personality variables like impulsiveness. And then we can start talking about the dualistic theory of the mind, which is limbic system versus prefrontal cortex. And the limbic system is the evolutionary older. It's one we share with dogs and cats and mice and rodents. And it is a very much stimulus response. So cues, right? You see something, you want it. You action, stimulus response. So when a temptation is around and you can smell it, touch it, taste it, feel it, any one of those senses, its power goes through the roof. So plans, on the other hand, tend to be done in the prefrontal cortex. So this enables us to see things that don't yet exist. It allows us to envision the future, to say, next month, I will do this. Or next week, I will make this reform. Or I will build this building or make this program, or I will create something that no one has ever even thought of. Beautiful. So we have, some people call it the parliament of the mind, where you have these multiple systems. Problem is that you make a plan. Let's say I'm going to get up early and I'm going to go jogging. So that's done in the prefrontal cortex. But when that day comes around, all of a sudden you're not in an abstract bed, you're in a real one. And that bed is cozy, and that snooze button is right there. And it's only 15 minutes, and, you press it, and you know what? I could always exercise this afternoon. In fact, I think that would be a better idea, right? You have a dominance of this kind of intuitive, I have to say, I can document. So this is the struggle. And if I put you in a situation which really fires up that limbic system, I can drive your behavior. Now, it just happens it's really convenient to fire it up to get you to consume things. So that's the design of the world.
Is there any kind of tricks or techniques or any advice on how to be more aware of that? Because it can subtly kind of sneak up on you, right?
Oh, yeah. They're the people who actually recognize they have weakness of the will, acrasia. Again, not a lot of new under the sun. That's Aristotle. But people who recognize that their will is imperfect, they tend to say, you know what, I would love to come with you with a drink, but I know I wouldn't just have one. I'd want to have a good time, so I can't. So they recognize that temptations, that they don't have perfect willpower, and consequently they say, no, I can't shop when I'm hungry. I'll buy a whole bunch of crap. I can't have that in my fridge. I'll just eat it. So they tend to kind of respect that they are impulsive. And by respecting that, they actually have higher levels of self-control. So a little bit of, self-knowledge goes a long way. But there are kind of other elements that you can do. Like, for example, you tend to have the least willpower when you're the most tired. Go figure, eh? So what we do is sometimes counsel, well, when is your peak power hours? And for a lot of people, it's from about, but they have about 5 hours a day. Some people are lucky, they get 6 or 7. Some people will less, 4. But we say, what are you doing with those 5, let's say, beautiful hours of productivity when everything can happen? And if you're doing email, that's not a good choice. You want to be reserving those for your hardest, most taxing, most difficult pieces of work. And if people say, well, I come home, I'm exhausted, and I gave myself a task and I keep putting it off. And I said, yeah, that sounds what would happen when you're exhausted. Try scheduling it when you have more energy. And of course, there's all those things we do when we have, for example, can sleep well, eat well, and get enough exercise. It's a virtuous cycle, because if you start sleeping well, you tend to eat better and you tend to be more productive, which gives you more time for exercise, and you go forward and forward.
Didn't you say that the number one reason for procrastination is sleepiness or fatigue?
Yeah, being too tired. That's the number one.
That's a big deal because everybody's tired.
That's right. And you can't do it all. You can't. I mean, I had a student in my class. She was like completely frazzled. She actually broke down. It was so hard for her. I mean, she was working a job. She was taking an MBA. It was raising 4 kids, just everything. And I said, you're not putting yourself as part of the equation. What's your minimum operating set? What do you need to be? And you should always be striving towards it. A lot of people pretend they need less sleep, of course, right? But it usually is short-earned. We can get by with less sleep somewhat when you're younger. But of course, if you give teenagers an extra hour of sleep, they actually go up by a full letter grade.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow, that is.
If you have a bad boss, it's often because they're not getting enough sleep. They're just mean and tired. If we just could get more sleep, we'd be happier. The world would be happier. We'd be more productive. But we have this kind of philosophy of presenteeism. So, I'm at the office, but was that ideal? If and there's so many studies about this, about what's the maximum number of hours you can really work before it kind of really cuts into you. And you can really push yourself for a week or 2. But after about 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, that benefit's gone. So we kind of say, okay, let's get back to that minimum operating set of what you need to feel okay. And for her, it was simply getting her kids to cook 1 meal a week and really low expectations. And it's kind of like when somebody's below water and they can't breathe, they don't know whether they're 5 feet below water or 5 inches. So in this case, it was enough. She was just a little bit below water. It was a little bit too much for her. And just having those 2 or 3 evenings a week where she had a few hours now to herself made all the difference.
I got to say, it wasn't until, and only, fairly recently, I started measuring the quality of my sleep. Now that technology is kind of caught up and there's wearables, and it was very, very helpful. I never measured it before. I just either felt bad or didn't feel bad. I didn't know.
Yeah, and I think it's a great use of technology too. I do that as well. And
and I would write the next day, did I take any, a supplement, or what did I eat? Did I have any alcohol? So if I wake up and I felt good, I would write, what did I have last night? And man, I wish I had done it years ago.
And simple things of when are you stop consuming coffee during the day? That's a big one. What are you doing just before bedtime? Are you doing something really stimulating? That's why books are great. You want something that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. An actual printed book is perfect for then, because it's slowing you down. Are you going to bed at the same time, weekday, weekend? Trying to make it as regular as possible.
This has been great. I just want to kind of sum up and hit a couple more points. So the motivation equation, Is there an 80-20 here? In other words, is there some asymmetrical portion of this equation that above all else, if you elevate it or lower it,
it's impulsiveness. That's the biggest driver.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I would say it goes impulsiveness, then value, and then expectancy, in that order in terms of importance. Not to say that there are some people out there who are, showing extreme signs of learned helplessness, and which is resulting into some really destructive self-handicapping. But
that could be depression, some form of depression.
Yeah, depression. Okay. But when we do incidence rates, it's about 5 to 10%. So it's not the biggest group.
So that needs to be addressed before you kind of work on this equation, in the sense that, not saying it doesn't touch on the equation, but learned helplessness, some kind of cognitive behavioral, something needs to happen there, right? There's some, you need to reach a baseline before you really kind of work on these other.
Well, somebody has to you have to have a sense of agency, at least, that you can do something about this. We all procrastinate to one degree or another, but a lot of people just kind of block it out because they feel guilty about it. And they need, look, if there's a Pope of procrastination, I'll take the role. I forgive you. I really forgive you for it. It's not your fault. It's who we are. You can forgive yourself, but accept responsibility. And that's the thing. You have to be able to not to have an emotional reaction towards your own procrastination, which most people get stuck on, and take it more like, okay, this is something I have to work with, and take responsibility, because there are so many things you can do about it. And sometimes you're just 5 inches below water, and you just need one technique to actually be in a place where you're okay with your life.
So you ranked in impulsiveness, value, and expectancy. Thank you. I'm glad I asked that. So give me one example of increasing value or tweaking the value parameter.
Even the energy one is tweaking the value one. It does two different things. I mean, if you've just tried doing something difficult when you're super tired, it's awful. You've made it excruciating. But there's all these elements like in job crafting, where the job and work doesn't stay just itself. We can, for example, do it with a friend. Some people will do a little gamification with it. There's things we can do to make it worse. If you feel like one of subsection of procrastinators are the more autonomous, needing, and somewhat disagreeable too. I know who you are. And they experience something called demand resistance. And if you tell them that they have to do something, you just made it that much more unpleasant for them.
Oh, that's me. That's
right. So they have to come at from a point of freedom and agency. They can't feel like they're forced into it. And then there's kind of fun, paradoxical interventions where you tell them, okay, I'm telling you that not to do anything about your procrastination. Don't do anything about it. Now see if you can split that one.
Paradoxical intention or something.
Yeah. And then, of course, by rebelling, they do something about it. But but this is now we're getting to a very personalized.
Oh, sure. No, I get it.
Because so many of these things are just broad strokes. They pretend like we're all of one thing. We're not. We all have our particular patterns and our particular vices. I mean, you can ask people how many people procrastinate by cleaning, and then you can ask how many people procrastinate cleaning.
You just hit home. There's a lot of people. The bell just rung, Piers. No, but you're right. But I'm asking for very personal examples, just as proxy, just as examples, because value is so broad, right?
That's right. And there's in the book, I give a lot of other different techniques about how to kind of change the value of them. But it's difficult to give, because it's inventive. People can be as inventive as they want to be regarding this. Like cooking. I found I love teaching my kids how to cook. It's fun, right? But cooking by myself, not so much, or even for myself.
Oh, no, that's me. Yeah, I'm with you.
That's right. So it's, there it is. I mean, there's the same task, but how I expressed it and what I went and did about it. And really what we're trying to foster is intrinsic meaning regarding it. The joy, the artistry of it, because the extrinsic, the rewards after it, they don't work quite as well, because intrinsic rewards, there's no delay between when it's being produced and when it's consumed. You produce and consume during the action yourself, and that's exactly where you want to be.
It's very interesting. Well, just real quickly, some of the myths that you list regarding why people procrastinate, which, for a long time, I think I probably adopted some of these myths or believed them, like people don't procrastinate out of fear of failure necessarily.
No, not necessarily. That's rare. I mean, there certainly is about 5 or 10% of the population which says we experience like anxiety and then says, I won't do the task. And so therefore, anxiety causes me to procrastinate. And from their personal experience of themselves, that seems true. Of course, as psychologists, we can see, well, there's also a lot of people who feel the exact same anxiety as you and then act. So it doesn't seem like the anxiety. It really is an interaction between fear and impulsiveness. Now, it doesn't mean for you that addressing that fear won't help, but also be addressing impulsiveness. But don't generalize that to the population at large. And that's really the problem that's been done. We had these clinical psychologists, they dealt with these high anxiety patients who tend to go to them, and they made these conclusions from a very small subsample of the population. And okay, that was good for the 1970s and 80s when we're starting off, but not today.
Yeah, I thought that, I may have in the past mislabeled a fear of failure really is just low expectancy, right? In other words,
that's right.
I just don't expect to succeed. That I'm not afraid of anything. It's just, again, not motivated because I just don't think my efforts are going to pay off. Yeah. But it'd be easy to, mislabel what it is that I may be feeling, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, for example, autism. I deal a lot with the autistic community for a variety of reasons. And one of the ones is social skills. We want them to develop social skills, but if they don't get a certain level of comfortableness and success with it, then they don't pursue social relationships, which they don't practice, which makes future social relationships uncomfortable, which means they don't want to engage them, which they get even less practice. So it was the idea, the entire challenge there is to give them enough hand-over-hand help so their social skills are at the point where they can start engaging in people in a rewarding way, and then it takes off by itself. So it's again, each one of these things, or it can be a deep dive, but there's always options, and so many of them. It's just getting them out to people and helping them understand what they are.
Piers, this has been fantastic. So tell everybody where they can find you, and I'm going to point them to procrastinist.com. I guess that's your site, right? Anything else? Can they find you on Twitter? Are you on the social?
Yeah, but I don't use social media very much. I have a Twitter account because when the book was on, I really felt responsible for promoting it for the publishers. And so I said, I'll give you 3 years.
Piers, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you. And we've gone over the hour, but
we got over there.
I could talk to you forever. Did you say you're working on another book right now?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to put you on the spot for motivation. Do you have a date?
No, I don't. It's just one of those things that gets bigger and bigger. And it's just like, I'm trying to kind of get edges around this, but it's one of those things that the more I do, the more things I see connected to. And it's just, I have to make some harsh editorial decisions about where's going to be the edges to this project.
Please let me know when you get close because I want to have you on again. This has been really, really good. So I'm pushing you to the website and all the links. Thank you so much, man. This has been very helpful. Thank you, Piers.
Great to be here.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, do share it with your friends and on your social platforms. Big thanks to Sam Williams, my audio guy, and the beautiful bumper music you're hearing is Michael Petrovich's Bella Luna. For all my show notes or resource links, visit LarryWeeks.com, and we will talk again soon.